This is Dr. Essie Stacey, helping you to be well. Hi everyone, I have got Veda Austin, remember that name, with me this morning. It's morning for me, and Veda, welcome. Where are you? Tell us where you are, what time it is, what kind of weather you have there.
Sure. Well, I'm here in New Zealand and it's currently 9 o'clock in the evening and it's winter and it's cold. And complete opposite to you.
Exactly. And we can't see, I mean, I wish it was daytime for people to see where you are, because just describe where you are in New Zealand and your landscape.
Yeah, well, just a few little way down the road, it's about a 5 minute walk. There's a beautiful beach called Snell's Beach, and so I have a lovely view from here of it. And New Zealand, I mean, it really is everything everybody thinks it is. It's so beautiful. It's got beaches and mountains and like bubbling hot springs and everything you can imagine. It's like I love to travel, but I always love coming home.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for being with us, Vida. As people are beginning to sign in, I'm going to write in the chat box. I'm just going to say hi, everyone. Do write in the chat box, and as we're going through Vida's presentation, please do type your comments and questions that you have into the comment box. So Vida, just start by, because I normally talking about food, and I know waters are kind of a little bit about food, but sometimes we talk about the heart, and we have Dr. Stephen, a friend of mine, who is a specialist in how communicating through the heart can help us to be well. So we do have that. It's not just food, but tell us about you, a little bit about how you, just introduce yourself to us.
Of course. Well, we're going to be talking about water because that's my area of specialty. And I specialize in two areas. The first area I studied for 3 years. I didn't study. I am a water researcher. So in my professional capacity, my research was to define the characteristics of a healthy water. So a lot of people think all water is just water and it's all good for you. But there are different measures outside of just an analysis of water to indicate what a really healthy water is. So that was one area that I focused on. And my area is also in crystallography. So I use the crystallographic medium to study water's expression of health. So I have a specific technique whereby I was able to tell what the structures of tap water traditionally, like repeatedly, look like compared to the patterns that form that are very specific from a spring water that's taken directly from source. So that's one area that I studied. Now for 8 years, I've been studying the water's ability to seemingly respond to human consciousness through a crystallographic medium. But not just to human consciousness, but to its environment. So I have developed a very specific technique, and I'll get into that a little later, whereby it is very interesting because I used to just freeze water. And then I started to look more and more into the new science of water and understood that actually there is a magical space as water goes from a liquid to a solid, which is a space of creation. That's where water can use its building blocks of ice to apparently repeatedly create imagery that is recognizable to the human eye and actually meaningful to the human being as a response to human consciousness, which is fascinating, and it touches on a lot of different other people's areas of research, but all my work is macroscopic. So that's what makes my work really different, because back in the day, I didn't have a microscope or anything like that. I was very inquisitive, and I wanted to find out for my own self whether water really could store information. So that's about halfway through my journey. Then we go back about 25 years prior to that, which is really where this journey began in a very unusual way.
So let me stop you there because I'm collecting all your bits of information, and then so the first, what is intriguing me first is, so you were studying basically tap water first of all. What drew you to that?
Well, actually, that's my most recent. So I worked for a couple for nearly 3 years, and they had significant benefits from drinking a very specific water that also really helped me to heal my body, which we'll get into soon. And they were so interested in what made it so different that they wanted me to be a researcher for them and actually really prove how and why it was so different. Like, what were the qualities that made it different from any other spring water? And that's where I really learned that you just simply cannot look at only the analysis. There's much deeper methods and more things you can do to study the qualitative aspects of water. And some of them are very simple and fun to do, and some of them are quite complex. But certainly no two waters are created equal. And they're very, very different expressions. And so that was my most recent sort of work. And it worked adjacent to the work I did with crystallography and consciousness. So I have these two areas of interest and of study that I've been studying for quite some time. And they do overlap because both of them are creating images and patterns. And that's what I'm excited about, is seeing repeated patterns. So when you start seeing repeated patterns, that's where you start noticing. It's like repeated patterns of behavior in people. We notice when we're repeating patterns. And it's what you look for when somebody's, sick. It's like, okay, have you got a headache? Have you got this? Because it's a repeated pattern from seeing what other people have had. And then we're looking for patterns. So I'm also looking for patterns in water to show, to basically show what kind of water it is, what kind of, not only what kind of, whether it's a tap water or a spring water or an artisan water or a river water, but also to show what its energetic is, what its ability to absorb information is.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting topic because it can be very reflective of us as human beings as well, because by molecular count we're 99% water. Our eye lens is 99% water. Our spit, our saliva is 99% water. We're only a cut away from liquid, an emotion away from liquid, a toilet break away from liquid, an exercise away from liquid. We're looking at each other with our 99% water eyes, and yet we never consider our body to be this liquid, sophisticated liquid system that it is, because when we look in the mirror, we see we're so solid. We think we're so solid. Whereas, in fact, we're minerals, salts, water, and consciousness. And so my fascination for water, and for salt in that matter, because we're not fresh water, we're salt water. And salt is a crystal, and crystals are in all of our technology, and they store vast amounts of information. So as much as water is always in flow, the crystal part, I think, is also where a lot of information is stored, which I think is why, in my particular studies, I've never been able to get imagery, very clear imagery anyway, in distilled water because it lacks dissolved minerals or salts. So I'm getting way ahead of myself.
I could just let you talk because we're getting the flow. We're getting the flow that's coming out of you. I feel so privileged. Let me just see who. Right, so we've got a question here from my son. You can see him in his what he's saying. Hey Veda, could you describe your relationship with water? So I guess we could go back to the beginning now, and you could take us through, your story.
Yeah. Well, around about 25 years ago, I was in a really horrendous car accident.
Shall I show that image?
Yeah.
Just a second. Let me move to the images. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So this car accident was considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice. The driver was actually decapitated. And I came to as the car stopped rolling. And I cried out for help. It was like I was immediately went unconscious when we hit the truck. And when we stopped rolling, I became conscious again. And the noise in the background is it's pouring down with rain outside, so hopefully that's not going to be too distracting, but it's timely. And so I was taken to hospital, and they spent days picking all the glass out of my face. I had a broken collarbone, internal bleeding. I was, I looked like I'd just been hit by a truck, literally. And so over the course of 20 years, I had to have 8 operations, and most of those operations related to the car accident. And 4 of them were for bowel surgery because the seatbelt had crushed my internal organs and had all that bleeding, internal bleeding happened, and it left scar tissue on my small bowel. And that grew. So whenever I would try to eat food, now that I've had children, I can say it was like being in labor every single day. God. And so I was in hospital so many times, and every time I'd go to hospital, they'd put me on an intravenous IV drip, and I would improve. And I would improve because there was no food. My body wasn't needing to digest anything. So after bowel surgery, I was so much better. But then even where he had done the surgery, scar tissue grew then. And so I had to have more surgery. Oh, and on my last surgery, they went in for bowel surgery, but when I came to, they said, listen, you didn't recover very well. And you've actually got blood, like showers of blood clots in your lungs. And so bearing in mind that I've never drunk alcohol, I've never smoked a cigarette, I've never done any drugs, I've been vegetarian since I was 8. I live a very holistic life. I was really shocked that had happened to me. But they think because I'd had so much anesthesia and so many operations that I had just become susceptible. So they wanted me to be on warfarin, which is a blood thinner, as you know, and they said I might have to stay on that for the rest of my life. And I'm like, back then I was, only in my 20s. And I was just no way. I was not keen on that idea at all. And so a friend of mine who was an MD doctor and also studied Ayurvedic medicine said, listen, totally off the record. He said, if you can find a natural, emphasis on natural, high alkaline water, it might be able to help stabilize the clotting of the blood. He said it's worth a try. It's totally natural, and he'd seen some positive results from that. He wasn't saying don't take warfarin, but he was saying this could be something else that you could look at doing as well. So I ended up being on warfarin for 3 months, and it was a horrible. I mean, I really feel for people that are on it every day because you're bruised up and you get all these tests done all the time. And they said, listen, at the end of it, they said, look, there's not a trace of it in your body anymore. We think you're fine, but like really take care of yourself. And they would have preferred me to stay on it for another year, but I'm like, no, listen, I'm going to look after my body. So that's where I really started actively looking for a natural alkaline water. It's where I first started becoming interested in water as something that could potentially benefit me. And so I started trialing. I became a guinea pig of my own health, really. And so I started trialing these 8-week trials of different waters. So I gave them a really good go. I didn't change my diet or skincare or any of those kinds of things, did the same stuff. And, other than feeling slightly hydrated, I didn't really notice much difference. So I was drinking water in the range of a 7.8 all the way up to about an 8.3. which you can find naturally here in New Zealand. And, I didn't know what to expect, because when we're drinking something, it's going into the body, it becomes part of us. So we don't really know how that's affecting us outside of how we feel and what's coming out of us. And so, in my mind, maybe it's helping. I don't really know. And then a friend said to me, listen, I know someone who has his own private water source. He's only giving it to cancer patients. He's got the whole analysis there. It's completely, absolutely pure to drink. She said it's 9.9 pH out of the ground. So the concept, some people might not know about what pH is. It stands for the power of potential of hydrogen, and it's the difference between a water that's very acidic or something that's very acidic compared to something that is much more alkaline. And the measure goes from a 0 up to a 14, and 7 is neutral, which is what distilled water is meant to be. So I heard about this high alkaline water, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And plus he's aware of its benefits, since he's being selective as to who he gives it to. So I went and saw him, and I told him my story, and he gave me a month's worth of water to drink. So I was super excited to try it, because the first thing I noticed is that there was a different taste and texture about it. It felt thicker somehow. And when you start becoming much more aware of water and how it feels in the mouth, because that's your first kind of connection with it, and its first connection with you.
Yes.
So I often think both ways, So I started to drink it and really noticed that first difference. And I really felt it going through into my body. I felt it just absorbing into my cells, were just like, oh, thank God. And after 3 days, I noticed something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's really important to talk about, because it is a sign of our internal health. And after so much bowel surgery, it was really relevant to me, was that you start noticing, I noticed a huge change in my bowel motions. So there are too many people out there that are really dehydrated, or even slightly dehydrated, and they're sitting on the toilet trying to push a pebble out for like an hour. and that's a sign that there's something going on that's maybe not quite right, and that you're probably dehydrated. And the sad part is that's a lot of people. There's a lot of people with that problem going on in the world, and they're wondering why. And people have a dislike. A lot of people don't like the taste. They don't think water's tasteless, because we've become so conditioned to the fluids that we're drinking having a taste. Yeah. That some people don't really particularly like, and it's a chore. But when I started drinking this water, it became the greatest gift. And so then on day 10, I started to feel and notice all these bumps coming up along my arm and along my jaw that were quite painful. And one area particularly was red and sore and raised, and it felt really kind of sharp. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I knew my body was expelling something, but I just didn't know what. And bearing in mind, this is 20 years after my car accident. And so I got some tweezers and I started digging into my arm. It sounds gross, but it's what happened. And then I noticed there was something that made a noise on the tweezers. It kind of made a clicking noise, and I'm like, what is this? And I pulled it out, and it was this little shard of green glass. And between day 10 and day 12, 27 pieces of glass came out of my body that had been embedded in my body for over 20 years. And I know it was from the car accident, because the man who was driving owned a nightclub, and in the back seat, he had all these crates of a beer, and some people can't understand my accent very well. So some people think when I say beer, as in the one you drink, they think I'm saying grizzly bear. But so just clearing that out, there were no grizzly bears in the back. But it was like this Steinlager beer bottles, and all of those bottles are green. So when the car rolled, I must have gone like this, and the bottles and the windscreen, everything was smashed together. And a lot of the most of the glass that was coming out of me was green. And so as disgusting as it was amazing. And I'm like, holy heck, how is this possible when the only thing I had done different was drink this particular kind of water? And then my little sciencey hat goes on and go, okay, I need to know what makes this water different. Like, why, when I tried all these other waters, nothing really happened, but the significance of what happened with this was so huge that I really wanted to get to the bottom of it. And I owned a wellness center at the time, and so it was a holistic place where people would come for healing. And so I decided that would be great to trial people. These were not clinical trials, so they were for myself. I wanted to see for myself whether I was a fluke. I just had some good reaction with this water, but I wanted to see if other people would be affected by it. So there were lots and lots of volunteers. I ended up, they all did 8-week trials, and I think I did the trials with nearly 100 people over the course of 2 years. And it went from very, very healthy people to very, very sick people, and a lot of people in between. And every single person had some form of reaction. The very healthy people found that they just had more energy. Everyone noticed a change in their eyesight. Every single person said, I just feel like I'm seeing clearer. One person had to change their prescription on their glasses because their eyes had improved so much over the course of drinking this water. And all they were drinking was a litre in the morning and a litre at night. And there were 2 people that had been coming to me, and couples, and they had been going through rounds of IVF, given up, and both of them got pregnant within that period of time. And then there were people that were losing a lot of weight, and they said, look, God, I don't know how this is happening. I'm always drinking all this water, but what they were drinking was acidic water. And a lot of the being overweight can be such an acidic condition because the fat collects the acid. Yeah. So if you're adding to the problem by drinking a lot of acidic water, it's not necessarily always going to be helpful, because it can add to the problem rather than flush everything away. So we want to get your body into a balance, a state of harmony, before it will let everything go as well. So we want to get it into a balanced space first. So I noticed all of these things, and then I was looking at the analysis again, and I was like looking at it in all these different ways. I'm like, there's got to be more to this, because it's not just because of the pH. I don't believe that it's just that, because I know people that have used ionizing machines and Kangen machines and haven't experienced anything like that kind of reaction. Yeah. Certainly, I tried that and it did nothing for me at all. In fact, I felt unwell. And so this natural water had something different. So then I started going into much more deeper understanding of the different properties, I think, of the universe, essentially. So like Tesla talks of, if you really want to know the secrets of the universe, look at energy and frequency and vibration. So I was thinking in terms of music. And music creates sound. And sound has the power to, like an opera singer, can actually hit such a high note that glass can shatter. And I was thinking about frequency, and I was thinking about how frequencies make water change patterns, like in cymatics. And I was thinking, well, I wonder, and I do this a lot, I often say, I wonder, and then I discover whether it's true or not. And I said, I wonder if there is this water has potentially like a different type of frequency, that when I actually drank this water, the water within me literally changed in its frequency. And I feel like we all have our kind of, we're all resonating at our own symphony.
Yeah.
And so, or your song. And so it was as if there was a new note that was playing in my symphony. And that note was so high pitched that it literally said to the glass, well, not said to the glass, but we can say it in this way. It was like it said, look, there's just no room for you here. You're a third wheel. We're going to actually expel you out because you're an unnatural foreign object. And it was as if my body became alive again and realized and detected all the foreign objects in my body, because it didn't just get rid of the glass. It was so interesting. When I was even years before that, I remember having this big thorn go in between my knuckles, and we thought we'd got it all out. But actually, it had left a scar. When I started drinking this water, this thorn, this bit of this almost fossilized thorn started coming out. I have a scar between my knuckles from it actually coming out. So it didn't just get rid of glass, it got rid of every foreign object in my body.
Wow.
And I'm like, holy heck. So I started to then, at the same time, there was a number of people that started writing about water having memory. And so I was very interested in that, because I'd become very interested in water, understandably, with these experiences. And so the first very interesting piece of information that I read was written by a man in the I can't quite remember what year he was around, but he was a radionic engineer, and his name was Dr. Thomas Hieronymus. And what this man wrote was so interesting to me. He had gone into a Parisian meat market, and what he said that the freshly placed organs of the animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. So what he said is that the heart organ, for example, seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze, and it froze in the shape of the heart organ. And he said that the liver organ, it did the same thing, and the kidney, same thing, brain, same thing. And he made this observation, and in his opinion, he thought that even though the animal was dead, these organs, because they were fresh, still had fresh blood in them. And that blood held some kind of life force energy that was emanating out of the organ to such a degree that it was affecting the frost and the way that the water froze.
That's crazy.
And yeah, that's what I thought. And so then that was when Dr. Masaru Emoto's work was coming out, the Hidden Messages in Water. And one of the biggest gifts that I think Masaru Emoto gave to us, because he was really slammed by the scientific community. They were not supportive of his work because it didn't have enough double-blind studies, and they didn't, all that. But people loved his work. And what he really did was enable us to connect to water in a very intimate way through art. So his photos were works of art. And we were able to see and visually see what, through the lens of water what love looked like, what hate looked like, what gratitude looked like. And we were able to relate to that emotionally. And that's the power of art. And one of the most important things I feel that I'm bringing forward with the work I do is that I call it weaving with water. It weaves science and art and consciousness together. And when you do that, I think you see so much more than just one perspective. You see a much more well-rounded perspective. You don't miss anything that way. And you get to not only observe, but you get to feel and you get to appreciate. And it's a very interesting way of looking at things. And I think...
And can I just stop you there? Because what's it? The chap's name is Thomas Hieronymus. Did you say? Because I
I love his name. Dr. Thomas Hieronymus. He was a radionic engineer.
I don't know how to spell it, but I'm just going to put it in the chat box so that people can kind of try and Google it if they because it's quite important.
I'll send you the link.
Yeah, to understand that actually we're all on this journey. I get this impression that we're all on this water journey, spiritual journey, consciousness journey, and these people are playing an important part as we go along to wake us up to this sort of integration between, if you like, the quantum and the physical. And often that consciousness bit is the artistic bit, isn't it? It's the imagination and art. Imagination is not nothing, it's quantum.
Yeah.
And so what I believe is that you're part of that journey now. You're part of, if you like, the great awakening for us all, because it's once we begin to govern our own body water, we begin to enable to make ourselves well. Can you imagine if you can consciously affect your water to an extent that water did, then we can make ourselves well. I know no one's asked it yet, but is that water still available?
It is. It's what I mostly drink, and it's really anti-aging as well, which is lovely. But all those people that were on the trials never wanted to get off the trials.
I bet. I'm going to move to New Zealand because, like, if that's the water, then I'm going to, wherever you are, I'm coming. But anyway, I don't want to interrupt your flow, so please carry on. Yeah.
That's fine. So I was very grateful to Emoto's work because he really opened a door for the art, for the connection, and it is just because it's not considered scientific in traditional terms doesn't mean that it isn't scientific and that it's a discovery. Science is discovering things. He discovered something. Yeah. And, he brought some old wisdom forward, and I love that. But also there is someone I've become very good friends with. He's not so well known, but he is well known in France. He's a French microscopic photographer by the name of Laurent Costa. And so Emoto did all these beautiful flash frozen geometries. So anyone that doesn't know Emoto, I'll just say what his work did was he was able to, say, for example, have two glasses of water. One said love and one said hate. And then he flash froze a tiny little bit of that water and microscopically photographed the geometries that formed or didn't form. So the geometry that would form for gratitude or love was absolutely stunning, much like a beautiful snowflake. And the geometry or lack of geometry that formed for hate looked pretty much like a mudslide. It really hadn't formed any complex geometry at all. So when you compare them, and his work was very much in comparisons, so that's often how we see life, in contrast. And
for his work, you had to, I heard one of his researchers talking where we met at the water conference, and she showed us pictures of her with this microscope at in this room at minus 20 degrees with the gloves and everything. I mean, it's not something that you and I are going to easily replicate, is it? So this is why I think your stuff is really exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, so I then, so Laurent Costa's work kind of is, it's like, very interesting because although he was looking at things microscopically, what he was photographing was imagery, not so much geometry. So what he was photographing was perfect hearts and fish and faces, and they were really remarkable, incredible, and beautiful. He has a book called Into the Heart of Water, and it's in French and in English. I've got it over here, actually. And so on the cover, you can see the heart that I'm talking about. And, he was very inspiring for me because that's where I started to think, wow, when you start putting those three inspirational people together, I was like, okay, well, I want to see for myself if water really can store information. But at the time, I didn't have a microscope, but I had my iPhone and I had a petri dish and I had some amazing water. And I'm like, well, I don't have my hand is connected to my body. It's not severed like in Hieronymus's observations. And I thought, well, maybe it'll make a difference. Maybe I'll just send some love into the water and I'll freeze it and I'll just see what happens. I really had no expectation of what would happen. But as I was holding it, I noticed that there was some fluff in the water. So I was like, oh, God. So I put my hand in to take the fluff out. But I consciously thought, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's memory. That was my conscious thought. And then I put it in the freezer. And I kind of forgot about it for a little while. And then I was like, oh, yeah, let's see what happened. And so I pulled it out of the freezer and I wiped the frost on the bottom and I held it up to the light. And I'm like, oh, my God. There was this hand.
Shall I show that one?
Show the hand. And it took up half the petri dish. So it wasn't tiny. It was huge. And it was so obviously a hand. And I took that photo and I was a little bit freaked out, honestly, because I was not expecting that at all. And I went to my son Rama, and I said, hey, Rama, what is this photo? What's it of? And he goes, oh, it's a hand, Mum. And I'm like, it is a hand. It really is a hand. And so I kind of got over that, and then I'm like, okay, what would be the most informed water that I could get easy access to that might be able to show me something I haven't seen before? And so I went down to the beach, and I got some seawater. And I froze. I got a little bit of that, and I put it in my petri dish, and I froze it. And the image that appeared was this amazing fish. Do you think you have that?
I've got that. One that's
coming up next. And the fish has this perfectly round eye. It has all the fins and the shape and the tail. And you'll notice also that it kind of looks like there's feathering around it, and you notice that's the difference between seawater and regular water. So you notice this kind of feathering, which is quite interesting. And so I'm like, oh, well, this is when my freezer became my most used household appliance. And I started getting really excited because I kept getting image after image after image after image. And there's really no end to the influences that you can play with when you start thinking about what can you do. So I started refining my technique over time as I became much, much more aware of the new science of water. And one of my very dear friends and mentors, his name is Dr. Gerald Pollack. You would have met him at the water conference. And he has guided me along this journey, giving me suggestions, trying to suggest how I could make it as scientific as I could, given the context of my work. And So he suggested that I get a kind of questionnaire together with something like 25 photos, and don't tell anybody what the photos are of. And just so I did that, and I simply said, what does this image look like to you? And then I sent this questionnaire out to friends who posted it out on social media, so people had no idea what the pictures were of, what they were made of, that it was connected to me at all. And within 3 days, I had 297 people have filled out these forms. And 85% of those people recognized the images for what they were. And 3 of those images, 100% of people recognized them. So this is image recognition. And some of the images are so clear that I have a program that as I've developed going along on this journey, I started to learn more and more about computers because I didn't really know anything that much. And so I found out that there is a thing that if the image is recognized and clear enough in the forefront of the picture, there is a thing that can take the background out because it can recognize it as an image.
Yeah.
And so some of my work is so clearly recognized that the backgrounds can be simply removed because it can see it as an image. And so then I'm starting to wonder, okay, so since it seems to appear to like to respond through imagery, how about I give it an image? So I got this. I'm just trying to think about the one that we've got lined up. I think it's the
Wendy.
one with
Wendy next.
Okay, is it one with all of them or
just Wendy? Yeah.
Perfect. So this one I love. So I got a photograph of my friend Wendy, and what I did was I printed that the photo out and I placed a petri dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds. 30 seconds is kind of the sweet number. It's not too long, it's not too short. I don't think it needs to be that long, honestly, but 30 seconds, and then I placed the water into the freezer. And that image that I'm guessing that you're showing, because I just can't see it on my screen, is water's literal snapshot of Wendy's photo. You can clearly see her features are defined in this image, and it's almost as if all the water molecules are working as some kind of collective, like pixels, to create this kind of snapshot as a conscious working system to say, this is what we see, and showing me. And so I got pretty excited about that, and so I wanted to move on and see if this would happen again with different people's photos and different faces. And so the next image that you've got, so it's shows the Wendy. One with Wendy, and I think each ice image is below the photo. So the next one you'll see, which I also love, I took a photograph of this man, the scientist that was giving a talk at the water conference, Igor, and he really enjoyed my work, and he was totally great about me doing a test with water with his photo. But you can see that water has clearly defined his features, and his nose and his chin and the way he looks is very, very much relative to Igor compared to the way Wendy looks. And then the next one, this was interesting because I didn't show water a photograph, even though I've got that photograph to show you of what this monk looks like. I wrote his name down, and he's a very, it's not an English name, and so it was great because I wrote the name down and I placed the water on top of it for 30 seconds and froze it. And that's the image that came about from a different type of influence, which was simply that man's name. And then the next one was a complex thought. So the photo is of me when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I was thinking back to that time when I was around about that age. And I said to the water, so there are many types of influences, and I'm right out on the edge anyway. So I thought, I'm just going to say something instead of giving it a physical thing. I'm going to speak. And I said, can you show me what I'm thinking? And what I was thinking was of me at that age going through two feelings. I was going through the feeling of being happy and also the feeling of being sad, because at that age something sad happened to me, but at that age also something happy happened to me. And what's very intriguing when you really study the ice photograph is that there are two faces pointing in two directions. If you look one way, it's a happy face, and it's almost as if it's kind of drawn like a very simple two dots and a line and a smiley face. But if you look in the other direction, it's much more of a realistic type of look, where she actually looks very sad. And I'll outline them for you, and maybe you can put them up later or share them in comments or something, so people can actually study that, because it's a very complex photograph. And then the next one is of my two children, Rama and Shanti, and I took that photo of them, and I did that same technique where I put the water on top of their photo, and I get a lot of different colors coming through, because in my house, even though it's dark here, you can see these giant windows, and there's lots and lots of different colors come through, and depending on what throws I've got on the couch and stuff, it lends itself to an artistic expression, because a lot of different colors can come through. So sometimes you'll notice they're blues and they're different. Sometimes they're just very kind of typical ice colors. And what's cool about that photograph is that you can clearly see them, the boy and the girl in the picture. But where my daughter's ear is, you can, if you actually go close up on it, you'll see there's a perfect little spiral where her ear is. And it's very unusual, because I would never normally see such a perfect little spiral in ice like that. It was amazing. And then the last one is of water's response to media. So that's one of the other types of influences that I've done, because these are all things we're influenced by. So we're influenced by images, we're influenced by sound, we're influenced by words, we're influenced by the media. So I'm like, well, we're bodies of water, and this is also a kind of body of water in a way. And so I wanted to see how it would respond. So that image is water's response to the movie Avatar. And it's also the image that's on the cover of my book, which I've just got put out, called The Secret Intelligence of Water, because I loved the movie Avatar so much. It had such a beautiful message. And I think that the way water is expressed, the features and the lines, the complexity, and the colors, I think they're really beautiful. And it reminds me of kind of an Egyptian type of feel. It's very ancient looking. So then I went, since I'm, like I said, I've started talking and saying words and getting responses, I thought, I said to the water, do you know who I am? Because by this time, we're forming a relationship here. So I'm like, do you know who I am? Because I've got nothing to lose by doing this. And what my job really is to record what I see. That's the true nature of science, is to discover and to record what you see. So as unbelievable as they are, even to me, and I still occasionally get a little freaked out. And this one was one of those times where I said, do you know who I am? And you'll see that the image that appeared is my initials, VA. But what's even more amazing is that they are linked in the exact same way that I link my initials together. Because you can see in the comparison in that photo. And by that time, I'm like,
let me just stop you there. I mean, what's going on, do you feel? I mean, that image is just so, like,
I know,
out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, I can't tell you exactly what's going on because I have no way of proving exactly what's going on, but I have theories. I have a lot of theories of what's going on, and I have what I know feels like what's going on. It's pretty obvious because I have over 10,000 of these photos now. So even if you're just looking at it from a very, rational mind, it's pretty out there. But when you have that amount of photographs and that amount of consistency, you can't overlook the bulk of it, the consistency of it. So I actually think that water is not only responsive to human consciousness and its environment, but I actually think that it is potentially even has a kind of consciousness itself or an intelligence. So if we don't just simply brand everything with the yardstick of human consciousness and intelligence, because it's like, how does a tree know when it's autumn? How does it know when to let its leaves change color? How do chameleons know when to change color if they're not aware somehow of danger? How do, there's so much evidence of intelligence in nature. How does, a caterpillar know when it needs to go into a chrysalis and become a butterfly? There's all different types of intelligence in the world. And the one common thread in every single life force on this planet is water. Water literally shapes and gives shape and form to everything. Leonardo da Vinci said it's the driving force of nature, but I also think that it is the architect of nature. And what we see when something dies is that slowly over time the water evaporates, and then it's only what's left are the salts. Because even when someone is cremated, the salts, the ashes are actually salts. And so everything that the minerals and the salts go back into the earth, but the water leaves. And one thing that we observe with water is it's always in one of its states. You can't kill it. It can be polluted, but eventually it will evaporate and it will come back again. So it's something that we see reincarnating all the time. It doesn't die. And like I said, it's important for us to remember that by molecular count, we're 99% of this rebel element. It's a rebel because it refuses to conform to the laws of physics, because it expands when it cools, and it refused to conform to the laws of gravity, but it's going to make its way up through trees. It is the most magical substance, and there is no life without it. And also, most scientists will tell us that at least 60 to 70% of water, they say, came from asteroids or meteorites. So essentially, it is an alien substance that we need to survive. So I really feel like the understanding of water, or starting to the connection with water, is a very important step towards understanding our own health and potential. Because what we know about water is so minute, which means what we know about ourselves is so tiny. And that is something that has always been fascinating to me, of the fact that if we break everything down, essentially we're minerals, salts, water, and consciousness. And so those are the areas that I love to study. So as I started continuing on, I said to water, I said the word shalom. I said shalom. And the image that you've got there, it definitely, like, I've had a lot of feedback with this one. So a lot of people say it looks like Yeshua or Jesus or one of the archangels. And it certainly is a very powerful image from the word.
This is the one that just blew me away at the water conference. Because I'm like, because you didn't have a title to that image or anything, and I'm like, but that to me looks like Christ.
Yeah, and it does.
And
It
so
does.
I'm going to put that back on, and you just, I mean, say more.
Yeah. Well, that image was very impactful for me too, because it's pretty obvious when you look at it that it has been created and it's showing us water's interpretation of the resonance of that word, which essentially means peace. And that is what Jesus represented. And that is such a powerful image that was created by water. And there are so many references to water through all different kinds of scriptures of the world. And so it doesn't surprise me that water created this image just because I've seen it do all these miraculous things. But what it seems to choose to show me and to show the world is so selective and so impactful for us as human beings. And it's a very, very interesting thing that water is doing. So then I started to ask a little bit more deeper questions. And I said, because my mother, who was just the most amazing walking angel in the world, and my mother was so beautiful, and she passed away in 1999. And I said to the water, I said, "Can you connect to my mum?" And so the image that came back, and you don't have it, but the image that's coming up is relative to it. So it was very powerful for me. Because I used to live in Japan back in the day before there were emails, and my mother and I would write letters to each other. And at the end of every letter, she would write a circle with a heart in the middle, and that was the image that showed up in the ice for me. And I asked the same question a year later, and I got the same kind of image. It's always as if there's a slightly different artist designing the picture, but the images are still the same. And so recently a friend of mine who was also at the water conference, crazy about water, had his birthday, and he asked me to leave a couple of petri dishes out and ask people, all his friends, to send birthday messages to him and well wishes for the world in the other one to see what the petri dishes would show. But what he didn't know is that I had also put a petri dish out for him as a gift, because I knew that his dad had passed away a year before. And I said to the water, "Can you please connect with my friend's dad? And if his dad wants to leave a message, I invite him to do so." And so I left these petri dishes out. All of them had the same amount of water in them. And I left them out overnight because he's in the UK and I'm here, obviously, and we had to leave time for all these people to send their messages through. And when I came out in the morning to freeze them, I noticed that the one from his dad, for his dad, the water was nearly all evaporated. And I knew my cat Jiva hadn't got in there and drunk it, because he's done that before, and I made sure he was outside for that night. It was a very unusual, and when I froze it, this incredible image that you've got showed up in the petri dish, and you can see how huge it is. But you can also see that the ice is very thin because so much of the water had evaporated, and it's almost as if, because when you think about spirit, you know, a lot of people, I'm not making any claims or anything, this is just an observation, but you know, you hear enough people say that when they feel spirit, they feel it as cold. And when a gas expands, it cools. So it's almost as if it's some kind of vibrational vapor that is reaching in and making some kind of connection here, which is really, really, truly remarkable. And of course, that was very, very meaningful and for my friend. And what a gift that water gave back to him. And so then in stark contrast from going there, which I think is still incredibly, incredibly touching. And it really is very provocative and suggestive, making you wonder whether water is not just in this world and in the next, but is potentially even the veil itself. And it's because when you think about water, we understand water in 4 stages: a liquid, solid, gas, and a gel, or a plasma. But I think because we know so little about water, there's probably at least 27 or 28, or maybe more, different types of stages. And potentially spirit could be some kind of vibrational vapor. And it's just an idea, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? And so I wanted to start seeing how complex water could get. And so I wrote the word artificial intelligence because I was very curious to see what would happen if water had an idea of artificial intelligence, because I had recently watched something that about Elon Musk talking about this Neuralink thing that he was talking about going into the brain and aligning with the neurons and things like this. And so I wrote the word artificial intelligence, and I think you've got the image there. And I actually really like this image because it looks as if there's just literally something artificial in the ice. And when you have to remember that this was just water when it went into the freezer, there's nothing in it. It didn't do anything other than write this word. And it is a very artificial looking thing that's in there. And I've actually showed the zoomed out version of it because a lot of people struggle to believe that these are real. And so in my book, I've done a lot of zoomed out images so that people can see that they're the real deal. And so then,
and these are just Petri dish, just to go over it. Petri dish, 30 seconds of either writing. You've got the word written underneath, and then you put it in the freezer at what minus 20?
I think it's minus 23 on my freezer, set at my 23.
And then for how long is that?
Well, so I used to, years ago, just totally freeze my water, and still got cool images, still got the fish, still got the hands, still got many other different images. But as I said, I started to become more aware of water science. And one of the things that Gerald Pollack talks about is this 4th phase of water. And he talks about that in-between stage, the stage as water is becoming ice and as it's beginning to melt, that these two hold a lot of this type of 4th phase. And 4th phase water has many different properties, but one of the interesting properties that it has more of a lattice-like structure. So it's become more ordered. It's almost like the water has gone from kind of moving like crazy, which water molecules do in its natural kind of, the kind of water that we would drink. But they start to slow down and become more ordered. And then ice is considered a mineral. It's considered a mineral because it has the same lattice-like order as a crystal does, except that it's a liquid crystal. And again, crystals store vast amounts of information. So water appears to have this absolutely amazing capacity to store and hold information. So from an artistic point of view, I was very curious. I started pulling out the Petri dishes earlier and earlier and earlier in their states of freezing because I wanted to observe how it was happening. And I noticed that there appears to be 2 types of water in water. Sounds strange, but there is informed water and uninformed water. And it appears that the informed water, the influenced water, the water that has absorbed the information or the influence, likes to or appears to freeze first very quickly. So it goes and adheres to the bottom of the Petri dish in this amazing liquid crystal architecture. But the uninformed water freezes much slower. And so there you see that there are 2 things happening in the Petri dish. And I only now photograph the informed water and get rid of the uninformed water. So it's a very quick process. And I've been advised at this point not to share the whole thing yet, but I'm hoping to actually give a webinar to be able to actually teach this.
Yeah.
But essentially it's very short. It's just minutes.
Yeah.
And it's done, and it is truly remarkable because you get these 3D type of images, and it's a whole different way of looking at water. So it's where you literally are watching water metamorphosize from a liquid into a solid. You're watching it shape shift. You're watching it go from the thing that we drink every day to actually expressing itself, changing itself into an image that we can relate to, that we can have some kind of connection to as a response. So that's why I don't like to say I experiment. I don't like the word experiment. I know that occasionally I slip up because I'm around a lot of scientists that love to say experiment. But I consider myself to be a body of water. And I hate the idea of being experimented on.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the water would really like the idea of being experimented on. So I never go in with the attitude of let's see what it will do, then let's show me and let's do this and let's do it this way. I actually really honor every single petri dish of water that I work with and that works with me. And I form a connection with it. So for me, it's always such a surprise. I never know what's going to happen, and I don't have an expectation.
And that's what I was going to say, is that what it appears to me is that you have developed a relationship with water. And I think just in speaking to you over the time is that we all need to have that relationship, to develop that relationship. I always tell this story. Well, we went for a swim, my husband and I, just this morning, and I was really mindful to honor the water and open my heart to the water. When you go and swim in the sea, it can be quite frightening.
Yeah.
This vast, as you say, this vast, powerful body of water. And the temptation is to hold your heart and to hold yourself, to keep yourself safe in this frightening arena, even though, it's lovely to be there. And I got this sense to just relax, honor the water, and to allow I realized that in all this time I hadn't been attempting to have this relationship with the water. Although there was one occasion where I was in water, and I'd for a long time I'd been afraid of water, really afraid of deep water. And when I started to go for a swim daily, I started to sing it as I'm swimming, and I was singing Yod He Vav He as I'm swimming, Yod He Vav He Yod, just singing and swimming. Then one day I looked up and a seal had come.
Oh my God.
This little seal, because I wasn't wearing goggles, so I'm sort of blinking and thinking, is this real? And I guess what I'd done is I'd sort of signaled to this seal that, here I am. And so I think I'm wondering with you, over all these years, you've been called by the water. I do believe that mankind is on this journey, and I strongly believe that you've been called to help us to understand, to open our eyes to our body of water. Emoto did his work, and we've sort of marveled at it, but where you're bringing us to is that, hang on, this is about us and water and the water within us. You're taking that to another level through relationship. And I think that what we need to drag out of you a little bit more is that how are you having that relationship with water?
Well, that's relative to what your son asked me. What's my relationship with water? I'm having a love affair with water, and it's having a love affair with me. And not in multiple ways, because we are like when you were in the sea, you are a body of water in a body of water, just like you were when you were inside your mother's womb. And that is the key, I think, is that when we stop defining ourselves by our shape, by the container. Bruce Lee was the man, and he was like, be like water. Water, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a kettle, it becomes the kettle. Into a vase, it becomes the vase. But is it the vase? And so we are, if our skin was invisible and our organs were invisible, we would see ourselves in such a different way, because we would see the fluid dynamics of the most sophisticated water system on the planet moving within us. And we would see that we're not that different from all the tributaries and all the streams and the lakes and the sea and the aquifers on this planet. We keep thinking, we keep almost looking for reasons to see why we're different, rather than seeing and finding the reasons why we're the same. And water doesn't judge. That's what I mean. Water for me is also like a spiritual teacher, because it's taught me, just like my mother taught me, don't judge. It will enter the body of an ant or a worm or a badger or a lion or a snake, as well as you and me. It will enter the body of a homeless person and a rich person without a question. It doesn't have a judgment. It simply knows what to do, and that is to flow. And so my relationship with water is, when you truly love someone, you don't try and control them. You don't try to impose yourself upon them. What you do is you learn and observe what they like, what they love, how they move, how they look, their smile, the little things the little idiosyncrasies that they have. And you learn how to be selfless. And what I keep receiving from water is not just imagery, but what it's doing is showing us all that it has an awareness of us. And it has this liquid lens whereby it can show us as humanity, as individuals as well, what it sees and communicate. And it's almost as if it's found the time right now to use this particular method. And I'm sure there are other people out there that are also discovering things too. And water speaks to all of us. It's not just me. It's almost like sometimes, it's like grace is raining upon us all the time, but a lot of us have just got umbrellas up, as we need to take the umbrella down and just get saturated and allow and surrender, because so much of what we're afraid of is often some of the greatest learnings we'll ever learn when we surrender to it. And so water has become this, and by a love affair, I mean, I really mean it in the sense that it's the thing that I love. I wake up every day, I'm so excited to work with water. I even suggest to people, when they're in the shower, on the glass, to write "I love you" to the water, and see how that feels. See how the water responds in a way, like feel it on your body. It's not just for cleaning you, it's for healing you, it's for teaching you. And so I often am mindful of the words that we say. I often think, what was the last word I said before I drank this glass of water? What was the last word that vibrated out of my mouth? Because our saliva is what's going to be the first thing that water connects with us. And the saliva, I've discovered, because I've done some tests where I've spat into a petri dish. I know it's not very ladylike, but I've done a lot of tests with fluids that are not just water, but mostly water. And I was talking about the number 8 was the last thing that I had said. And a perfect 8 was like stamped into this bubble of saliva. It was truly amazing. It was one of those tests. You know how I did the test that Jerry Pollack suggested I do?
Yeah.
It was what does this image look like to you? That was one of the 100% that everybody said it looked like the number 8. And so the saliva was even so influenced that it created this 8, because that was the last word that I had said. So when you think about what the last word you've said is, and then you drink this water, the water is also going to be connecting with that word. And so it's really becoming mindful. You start becoming much more mindful when you consider water to be not only hydrating you only, but it has information for you, and it's collecting information as it goes through you. We talk about vortexing systems, and we talk about restructuring systems out there to change the structure of water, but we are a vortexing restructuring system.
Yeah.
And it's only going to work as to the degree of how fine-tuned we've become to it. So if we become, even just becoming aware of the feeling of the water going through into our body, just the same as our food. It's like, I recently did a video where we have a thing where we have a community tap nearby. It's not the water that I've been getting, but I like to go there sometimes. And someone has this wonderful aquifer, and it's open for the public, and you can just go along with your container or your glass bottle or whatever you want and fill it up, and you give a donation, and off you go. But in the background, there's all this incredible rapids and this waterfall. It's so beautiful. And so you really feel this sense of pilgrimage when you go to get your water, and you connect. And then in stark contrast, I went to the supermarket, and you see all that spring water, which is all bottled, mostly all in plastic, and it's all there with the artificial light and everybody going past, and just everybody's looking at prices and labels. And I think the supermarket is a wonderful place where we can show and say a little prayer, or say something, be grateful for everything, every life force, from plant to animal to water, that has been bottled, that has been packaged, that has been wrapped up in some Glad wrap and labelled and priced for our consumption. I think there's a lot of gratitude and a lot of love to be given in supermarkets. And my heart really goes out to whenever I go to the water aisle, I'm like, because especially when you've just gathered it from source.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. This is also our reality. So we can choose how we view it and how we honor it.
Yeah.
And I think there's the opportunity to really honor. And when you do that, you'll notice the water can become even sweeter. It can change in its flavor. And it's almost like and I've actually shown that you can take a regular tap water, which has a very disordered structural kind of look about it, and actually change that structure to these hexagons, which are indicative of a healthy spring water, simply through your intention, through attention and intention. And it can make a dramatic structural difference. I'm not saying, because there's water. Water is the ultimate solvent, so it's always picking up things along the way on its journey. So that's good and bad. So it's picking up salts and minerals and these kinds of things, but it can also get heavy metals and fluoride and all, chlorine and all these different kinds of chemicals that get put into the water. But the water itself has its own structural integrity, so it has its own structural information. The structure is different from what it holds. There's water, and then there's what water holds. So when you distill water, you take what's out of it, like all the minerals and salt content out of it, and it's sort of like in a different kind of space. But what you'll notice is that water is so quick to absorb everything. And so it's hungry for information. And that's what's very interesting when you start looking at that's the part of that, the crystallography that I notice, is that it's the water that appears to change structurally. I'm not saying it's going to take all the pollutants out if you say a prayer to water, but it will make a structural change, and that can affect the taste, because structure and taste can go together, even color. So that is there, and I know we're on to, I don't know, I'm trying to just have a look and see where we're up to with our next image. Oh yeah, so the piggies. I love this picture. So this is a very sad picture, but I love it because it's so obvious of what it is. So this picture shows two pigs, but the water was sitting. I had the petri dish of water in front of my laptop, and it watched. Because I think water is kind of omnisensory, and I say that only because that's what I keep observing in all of these images that keep happening, and I co-create with water. So one of the things I said is that, I don't like the word experiment, but I say I co-create because I consider myself to be the medium and water is the artist, but together we are creating something. And so I showed the water this YouTube video of this pig escaping from a truck that was taking it and many others to an abattoir. And I can't remember why I would show this to the water. I think my son had showed it to me and said, "Oh, show it to the water." I just did. I mean, I've been vegetarian since I was 8, so this is disturbing for me. But then I froze it, and you can see that what's so interesting about this image is that not only do you see that first pig, and you can see that its face and its details, but there's a second pig, and the video only showed one pig. So it's as if the water saw much more than what was revealed in the video, because it suggests that there was another pig that was trying to follow the one that actually jumped out of the truck. And it's as if water can see far, far more than meets the eye. And I've done tests where I've proven that, where you don't have it, but perhaps we can share it in the comments, whereby I've got a petri dish of water, and I put a butter knife on top of it just to see if it would get the imagery from the butter knife. And it was sitting on my desktop here, and just around it, not intentionally, it just happened to be there, were two little round coasters. And when the water froze, it showed the butter knife perfectly, but it also showed those two round coasters in the background. So it showed that it picked up the information around it, showing that it sees, it's all seeing. And when you consider that it's all in the atmosphere here, it's all in the around us, but because I can't see it, so we don't think of it. But we feel it in like, it's when the air becomes heavy and the mist forms and these kind of, we feel it in all these very natural ways, but we don't think about it in terms of its energetic properties. So it's really remarkable. And when you consider the relationship that we have with water, or don't, because many people they think, oh, it's just a drink, something we drink, it's something that flushes away our waste. In olden times, and even now, many indigenous and ancient people, and the ancients have said, water is a living being. Here in New Zealand, my father is Maori, and the Maori people say, the old people say, the health of the river reflects the health of the people. And here in New Zealand, it was the first country in the world where a river, it was called the Whanganui River, was given the rights of a person. Because the Maori were so sick of watching its belly, which is where it was all the gravel was being taken from it, being hurt, and because they see it as a body, as having a body, and that its mouth was being filled with effluence, and its head waters, which is considered to be the most sacred part of a human body, is the head, and so its headwaters had been diverted. So for the Maori and from a Whanganui River, and it is their belief that they are the guardians of this river, is that it was actually a type of decapitation. And so they rallied and rallied and rallied and rallied, and the government actually allowed and agreed to give this river the rights of a person, and the tribe, the Whanganui tribe, take care of that very consciously. That then led to the river Yamuna, the river Ganges, actually also being given the rights of a person. And then there's also the rights of nature, and this can carry on. And it is a beautiful way to honor our water, not as a resource, but as a relative. Because we keep forgetting water is the bloodline of life. And that is the key. The water that's in you is also in your child and in your children and all of the future that will happen from this bloodline of life. That keeps happening and keeps moving and flowing forward from all of us. And it is also our ancestors. And when you think about it in this truth, then there is a new way, a new relationship that you can form with the water that you drink. Know that the water you're drinking is becoming you. The same with the food. We see this external apple, for example. Imagine there's an apple, and then we eat it. Where'd it go? It's now part of you. So be mindful of what you're eating and what you're drinking is becoming you. And water has this wonderful way of also expelling. So we see this exchange of what goes in and also comes out. But if you consider that every time you're mindful of the water that you're drinking, each sip is an invitation for that water to replace the memory, because I believe that water is also capable of storing and holding memory. And that wherever you're in pain in your body, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional, then invite the water that you're drinking to actually flow to the place where you feel pain, and let it exchange itself for the water that's holding that memory, and then feel your belly getting swelled up and feeling like you need to go to the bathroom. And then you'll probably observe that there's a lot more fluid that comes out as you urinate, because we actually really do hold on to these memories, and they can be flushed out. We have this wonderful ability to actually get rid of, to flush it out, and know that water doesn't, it is actually grateful for that, because it can go back to source, and it can eventually evaporate and go back up and purify itself again, and become, it's always in a cycle. And so we can empower ourselves in so many ways when we start reflecting, and that even of that word, that's why they say, that the eyes are the mirrors to the soul, the windows to the soul. We're looking through liquid lens inside of ourselves, which is like each of our irises looks like some kind of like the cosmos or some nebula, and that water came from outer space, and that we really are so incredibly powerful. And by power, I always think of light. I think when you switch on a light, switch on a little thing and the light comes on. And if we're all starting to light up, and I think that the power of water truly, truly is starting to gain so much force now. Not only is it showing that it seems to have this intelligence, and Rudolf Steiner he said that all intelligence is in nature and that we're actually pulling our intelligence from it. And if that is the truth, then truly, I mean, I think that we're seeing that is happening within these amazing images and with other work that people are doing. I just am in awe of what is happening. And at the same time, I'm so encouraged because it means we have this unlimited potential within us, within every single drop. And we are the ocean. We really are the ocean. So, how just imagine how powerful that is.
It's just incredible. And Vida, we're on an hour and a half now, so I'm
Oh,
gonna have
really?
to.
Oh, okay.
No.
All
I
right.
think that rather than go through the others, I think you could just have to come back if that's okay.
Oh, I think
To
so.
just take us on a little bit more that journey and inspire us. And I truly believe that this whole water thing, consciousness, understanding our bodies, our body of water. I think it's a journey that we're going to have to digest some of the stuff that you said. Just say a little bit about your website, the book, your new book, so people know where to go to
Well,
get your
I'm
stuff.
just starting to realize that my battery's on red, so
Oh,
hopefully it won't die. But I can move over there if we have to, but you won't be able to see me. And I'm having to talk loud because it's like a thunderstorm happening in the
wow,
background.
wow,
So my website's my name, VedaAustin.com.
yeah.
There's lots of videos, lots of information you can find out about that. You can buy my ebook there. It's $12 US, so it's not going to break the bank. And there's just lots of information and examples on that page. And also on Facebook, it's just Google my name, look for my name, and it's there. And I've just started Instagram, but I haven't posted anything yet because it's all very new. And I've just got an account.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you start following me, and I'll start posting something at some point.
Well, we'll let you go, and thank you so much. And do please come back. I know you're going to get really, really busy from now on in, but maybe we can steal a little bit of your time in the coming months as
I'll
well.
always make time for you, beautiful.
Thank you, Vida. Thank you. So I'm going to
Okay.
say goodbye and play the outro. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. So grateful.
That's it for now, everyone. Remember, change starts with you. Be well.